welcome to Entre Nosotras, Latina Voices. We're doing part 2 of our conversation with Melissa Lopez, DMRS Executive Director and an immigration attorney well known here in El Paso. And welcome, Melissa. Thank you again for being on our show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
And so last time we talked about the public charge rule, and I'm taking advantage of the fact that I'm on screen with you to ask you questions that I get asked as a government instructor. So sometimes I have students that are legal permanent residents, but then because of cost, they haven't renewed their green card. And so usually I'm very scared for them because I know that this administration is very picky when it comes to these situations. Could you talk about what happens in those types of situations? Because perhaps now with COVID, more people are going to be in that boat.
And the other reason people are in this boat is because there's huge delays right now in the processing of the renewal of green cards. We're seeing that it's taking over a year. We had a staff member who filed a renewal for her husband, and he finally gets the renewal after about a year and a few months, and then there was an error on the card. They had misprinted his birth date, so he had to send the card back and then wait another year and a half for his renewal. So it definitely happens. The important thing for people to remember is that your residency card is not the equivalent of your residency status. So all the card does is prove your status, but your residency itself does not expire. So my card expired January 20th of this year. That does not mean that my residency expired on that date. My residency continues. The problem is that if you get stopped by an immigration officer, you won't have proof that you are a resident, or current proof that you're a resident. And so the ideal thing to do is between 6 months and a year before your residency expires, file the renewal to get a new card. And what you do is you carry the old card with you, the one that's expired, along with the receipt notice for where you applied to renew it. Now, one of the things that I will say, we often try and encourage people, rather than renew your green card, apply for naturalization. The residency card right now costs you $450 to renew. And that's a fee that you pay every 10 years. If you apply for your citizenship, the fee is about $800. But once you get your citizenship, 1, there's no danger of deportation, right? 2, you never have to worry about carrying a card again. 3, you're not paying that $450 every 10 years. And the thing that we know about immigration fees is that they keep going up. So it's $450 right now. That doesn't mean that it's going to be $450 forever. There's an attempt by the administration to raise fees again. So it's best to just go ahead and apply for naturalization, especially if we're talking about college age students who are going to school. They probably speak English, they probably speak the language. And one thing that's really important is that if people are lacking in funds to do some of these things, there are some organizations that will help. For example, with Daca, United We Dream will help certain people with their application fees. And so there is help out there if you're in a position where you need to do one of those things and you're not doing it because of the fee. The other thing to remember is that there are fee waivers. So if you're a college student and you're on scholarship and you don't work because you're taking an 18-hour class load or whatever the case might be, there is the opportunity to apply for a fee waiver for the naturalization application, or even for the application to renew your green card. So don't let those things stand in the way. There's a way to try. The worst they can say is no, and then you're back to where you were before, where you're trying to figure out how you pay for it. But if they say yes, then you've solved your issue.
And If they're applying for a fee waiver, though, it won't look bad on them, like that they can't afford the fee. So maybe, you know, they might have other financial difficulties.
So I think this is one of the things that the public charge rule really created a lot of fear about. Once you've become a resident and you've been a resident for a certain number of years, the danger of those things lessens. There are certain things that you're allowed to do once you've been a resident for a certain number of years, typically 5 years. But getting a fee waiver from immigration is not currently one of those factors that they take into consideration. You know, the fees are not cheap. They understand that. But also, I think there's a lot of different factors that play into your ability to be able to pay, especially right now in a time of COVID. You know, if you normally work 40 hours a week and have a full-time job, and this is what my typical income is, but right now because of COVID, my job is shut down and I'm not able to work, or, you know, I have family members that have been furloughed and told that they can't go to work. Even though their offices are open because they can't afford the payroll. All of those things are factors that can be taken into consideration to request a fee waiver. So I don't want people to feel like there aren't any options. You know, the important thing is to seek out help and then figure out what options there are for you in terms of helping to pay for some of those fees. I mean, there are also things like GoFundMes, and people get really creative when it comes to renewing those things, especially when you understand how important it is given the environment that we're living in right now.
And I know in the past, before COVID, your organization would sometimes host citizenship fairs where you even had some of the credit unions there offering to lend people the money for the fees.
Exactly.
And so hopefully you'll be able to do that in the future once this situation is under control.
Exactly. And we have a lot of our local, our state representatives that host fairs like that. For example, State Representative Mary Gonzalez has hosted a fair like that before. State Representative Cesar Blanco has also had fairs. Lina Ortega and Cesar and Representative Blanco are the two that have had it. Mary Gonzalez hosted a different type of fair, but they have these fairs to try and help people, and they're free of charge. But remember that DMRS offers free legal services all the time. You know, we served 28,000 people in 2019, actually almost 29,000. And of those, 94% of them received free services. And so, you know, don't hesitate to call us and try and qualify for a free legal service program. Again, the worst that happens is we say no, and then we're talking about low fees. But, you know, call and ask and see if you can qualify.
Recently, the Supreme Court said that Daca was legal. And so for people that might not know what Daca is, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's the program that was created for the group of people that we have typically called dreamers. Those individuals who are brought to the United States as children and have grown up here, have been educated in our school systems, go on to college and then get jobs, serve in the military. And so this program was created specifically for them, to give them not legal status, but a deferral from deportation. So basically the way that it works is that those individuals come forward and tell the government, okay, I'm here, this is my situation, and they're provided with work authorization, the ability to travel within the United States and to be in the United States. There are some kind of quirky requirements for it. When the program was first introduced, obviously, you could apply as a first-time applicant and then renew. In September of 2017, September 5th actually, or August 5th of 2017, the administration announced they were canceling the program. Obviously, there were lawsuits, and just over a month ago, the Supreme Court said not that DACA was lawful. What they said was that the administration didn't follow the proper procedure in trying to cancel the program. Because once you have a program in place, there's a law called the Administrative Procedures Act that requires you to follow certain steps before you can cancel a program. So for now, we have DACA. Our legal opinion as attorneys is that the program, the decision of the Supreme Court, puts us back to where we were on September 4th of 2017, meaning that the program is completely available 100% the way that it was created by the Obama administration in 2012. Meaning that not only can you renew, but we also believe that that means that people who have never applied but qualify also should be able to benefit. And so it would also mean that people would be able to get permission to travel outside of the country for certain very specific reasons. Unfortunately, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, the government that processes the application, hasn't really acknowledged the Supreme Court decision. They put out a statement saying we disagree with the Supreme Court, but they haven't really put out rules about how they're implementing this. And so we're in a little bit of a hold pattern. What we have decided to do as an organization is we will do consultations. We will definitely renew applications. That's something we've been doing. For those that never have applied for DACA, what we're going to want to do is do a very thorough consultation with that individual. And we're going to want to look at what kind of evidence they have to support their case. And then we will decide collectively with the individual whether or not it's in their best interest to apply for DACA. Because one of the things that people really need to keep in mind about immigration status and applying for immigration status is if you don't qualify, you should not apply. Because if you've never applied for a benefit, the Immigration Service doesn't know where you live. They don't know where you work. They don't know who your family members are. They don't have the information that they need to deport you from the country, quite frankly. Once you apply for an immigration benefit, you have to give them all of that information. And so you are putting yourselves at their mercy. And so that's why it's really important for us. And that's why here at DMRS, we're very conservative. There are attorneys out there that that are great attorneys and are much less conservative than we are in that respect. But we don't want to put clients in a position where they get deported because of an application that we filed. So we take a very conservative route when looking at these cases. But ultimately, it's a client's decision. If they decide that they want to apply, we'll typically ask them to sign a waiver saying that we've explained to them the risk and they want to take it anyway, and then we move forward.
And so perhaps other attorneys that are for profit might just want to take the money and not really explain the negative things that could happen if they file a program and then end up not qualifying.
I think what happened, and this is something that I tell clients all the time, or at least when I was taking cases, I would tell clients, I would tell them, look, go get 2 or 3 or 4 other opinions. If you have 3 other attorneys that agree with me and only one that's telling you something different, that should give you an indication of where things really stand. Ultimately, it's always the client's choice. So we as attorneys, our job is to inform. It's the client's job to make a decision. And so, sometimes people are so frustrated by their situations, and I've seen this a lot. They are so desperate that they cling on to any bit of hope that anybody gives them. And so if they go to an attorney and the attorney gives them just a glimmer of hope, they'll hold on to that. And so, you know, we do have situations where people come to us and they're like, oh, I should have listened to you because I went with this attorney and this is what happened. And, you know, ultimately, like I said, it's the client's choice. We as attorneys only inform. It's their decision to make. But when you're in what feels like a hopeless situation and suddenly somebody gives you a glimmer of a chance, it's hard to not understand why they would take that chance.
And no, I can, you know, I can empathize. I'm thinking of a student that that did end up getting DACA and was working under the table before because he didn't have status, even though he went to school here and spoke really good English and you know, was raised here most of his life. And so I see, you know, I see where it's good that we have ethical people that are giving them the best advice and warning them about what could happen. Do you anticipate that the Trump administration will try again to get rid of the program?
That's a really interesting question. I was listening to, I don't do much listening to political commentary about the president's office. Cause yeah, I don't do much. But anyway, I was listening to an interesting conversation last week that that it may not be in his best interest to try. I assumed he would. I assumed we would hear that they were canceling, they were going to take the right steps, because that was the one thing. The Supreme Court decision actually laid out exactly step by step what needs to be done in order to terminate the program. And so I kind of anticipated that that would come. I have heard, given the COVID situation and then given the approval rating currently, that it might not be in his best interest to do that. For his base, it could be seen as placating, because if they did what they did before, where renewals are allowed to continue, but just you can't, no new applications, that may be seen as placating and taking a step back on his position against quote unquote illegal immigration. And then for the other side, right, it might really turn people out to vote if he tries to cancel the program, a program that has about an 80% approval rating nationwide, or about 80% of Americans are in agreement that DACA-mented folks should be granted some kind of permanent status. And so I've heard both things. I've heard, my expectation personally was, yes, they were going to cancel, but it sounds like it might not be in his best interest politically to do that right now at this late point in the game, given his current approval rating.
And also, the fact that some of the people that have DACA are essential workers, right? A lot of people in the medical field, a lot of teachers, and so they're contributing to the economy. So maybe, like you mentioned, because of the positive view of them, maybe we won't see anything happen until next year, until after the election.
DACA is a program that focuses on providing a benefit to people who have been educated in our school systems, who have gone to college, who are working, who have been in the military, who are in the military. And so you're talking about a group of people. I mean, the number of teachers that we have in our nationwide that are DACA holders is pretty significant. You already have a situation right now with education being provided remotely, and a lot of teachers really concerned about the health and safety of their own families if they have to go back into the classroom. And so, I could see us facing a further shortage of teachers in the fall. And then if DACA was canceled, I mean, that would completely devastate the system. So I think I just don't see too much happening from now until November. I think there's not very much time.
And so if you had somebody that wanted to apply to DACA, they could potentially apply, but we're not sure if they would review their application or not at the U.S. Customs and Immigration Services.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. There's two things that could happen really. Is one, three things. They could reject the application, just not accept it. So, just say, okay, we're not taking these applications. They could accept it and then later deny it, which means losing your money, or they could accept it and then review it. So those are kind of the three options. Initially, we were hearing from our different listservs that they were rejecting applications. Over the weekend, I saw quite a few attorneys who had indicated that they were actually accepting the applications. And before the Supreme Court decision, we were receiving DACA renewal decisions, sometimes in as few as 2 or 3 days. So we should know sooner rather than later where we stand with that. But ultimately, it's up to the individual whether or not they want to take that chance. And for a lot of people, it's worth taking a chance. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
So that one is still pending, right? In case people want to apply.
Yes, definitely.
Living here on the U.S.-Mexico border, we're always in an interesting situation. I know DMRS is the only immigration agency in the region that has an unaccompanied minor program.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So an unaccompanied minor is somebody who comes to the U.S.-Mexico border without a parent or guardian. So it may be that they entered with a sibling or with an aunt or uncle, but not somebody who is their legal guardian. And so what happens is that because of a lawsuit 20 plus years ago, the children are placed into the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement. They're placed into shelters, so they're not detention centers, they're shelters, and they're basically taken care of. They have their basic needs met. I can't talk too much about the specifics of the program, but through this program, they get their basic needs met. And then they also have the benefit of a Know Your Rights presentation from our team. We also do a one-on-one legal screening with them where we talk to every single child and assess their legal status, their legal case to see what options they have to stay in the United States. And then the children actually have a right to what we call reunification, meaning that they have a right to be released from these shelters. There is a process that has to be followed, but they do have that right. And that's really important because it means that they typically are in the shelters anywhere from 30 to 60 days on average. And the most important thing for us, our number one goal for those children, is to get them with a family members or friends of family that can take care of them so that they're not in that setting. The vast majority of children that we have in this region get released to major cities. New York City, Houston, Los Angeles are big places. And then just, wherever they have family. We have seen a significant drop in the number of unaccompanied children entering right now. The Trump administration has implemented a number of different rules at the southern border that affect almost every single person's ability to enter the United States lawfully right now. And that includes children. And so there was an article just last week about ICE holding these children in hotel rooms, various hotel rooms along the US-Mexico border, and then deporting them within days without them ever having the chance to speak to an attorney, to get any sort of legal guidance or any sort of legal advice. They're being deported under a special rule, Title 42, that allows the US government to implement certain rules in a pandemic situation. And so it's affected our children quite significantly.
There's the Migrant Protection Protocols, which is also known as Remain in Mexico.
So Remain in Mexico, basically what it does is it requires anybody who's coming to the United States to seek asylum who's not from Mexico, it requires them to wait in Mexico for their asylum hearings. So basically what happens is they get processed, they get given a court date, and then they're returned to Mexico. On the day of their court, they show up to the bridge at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever time they're told to be there. They're brought in for court, and then they're returned that same day to Mexico, again, to wait for their next court hearing. The problem with Remain in Mexico is due to COVID, they have the MPP courts, the Remain in Mexico courts, have halted. We have not had a Remain in Mexico hearing in months. They were supposed to resume a few weeks, 2 weeks ago, and I'm not sure that they did. I was out on medical leave, so I didn't get exactly get to follow that. And then I had my conference last week, but so those individuals are basically just stuck in Mexico. You know, there was a real concern, especially, and we're talking about all along the US-Mexico border. So Tijuana, Nogales, El Paso, Palomas, Matamoros, Brownsville. There was a real concern, obviously, for those in the Remain in Mexico program over the weekend because of the hurricane. So you have people living in makeshift tents, having to survive a hurricane in a tent. And so there's a real concern about this program and whether or not it's lawful. There have been challenges to the program, but so far the challenges have been unsuccessful.
So a lot of the people there are applying for political asylum. Could you talk about like what it takes to get political asylum?
So they're all applying for asylum. You know, right now under the current administration, it's really, really difficult to get asylum. They're actually in the process right now of trying to make it virtually impossible to seek asylum. They've changed the rules. They're trying to implement a fee. Currently, it's free to apply for asylum. They're trying to implement a fee. You know, forcing people to wait in Mexico is really problematic because the attorneys that can help them are not in Mexico. You know, even when Remain in Mexico was in full force last year before we had COVID, I was not allowing our staff to go into Mexico. There was a lot of liability attached to it. There's, you know, really, I mean, we don't have an office in Mexico, and so there was no way to assure the safety of our team. And so our team was at a real disadvantage in terms of serving those individuals. And we're the largest provider of free legal services in the region. And we weren't able to really serve those in Remain in Mexico in any significant way. And so, you know, it is a way to cut people off from legal representation. And without legal representation, your chances of winning asylum are virtually none. I think without legal representation, your chances of being successful in an asylum case are about 14%. That number increases by 5 times when you have an attorney. And so that's the biggest thing, is that without legal representation, it's just really, really difficult. You know, you have people who are largely uneducated because in the Central American countries, they go to work at a very young age. And so education is not at the forefront of the mind. It's about trying to feed your family. And then you start getting these threats from the gangs, from the pandillas, threatening your family, or they kill a family member, or any number of things. And so there's a real genuine fear, but you know, you also have a culture here in the United States where we go on vacation in those places. You know, how many people go on vacation in Mexico? And so then they come before an immigration judge and they're talking about, you know, that they got attacked by the federales in some city in Mexico. And the immigration judge is sitting there thinking, oh, well, I just went to that city and I, you know, spent a week there on vacation and nothing happened to me. It's like, well, yes, because you're in the tourist part. You're in the fake part of the city, not the real part of the city. And so I think there's a lot, the asylum system has been broken for a really long time, but it requires people to prove a lot of things. I make the joke that you have to show who's trying to harm you and why they're trying to harm you. And I make this joke during my presentations that what it essentially requires you to do is, you know, somebody comes to your front door and puts a gun in your face. And you're supposed to ask them, well, can I ask who you are and why you're here and why you're threatening me? And then they tell you, and you're like, okay, well, do you mind putting that all down on paper and then signing your name so that when I go to the United States, I can show the judge exactly who you are and why you're trying to hurt me? I mean, that's just unrealistic. Somebody comes to your house with a gun, you run and you don't ask questions. But our asylum system requires them to, expects that they're gonna know who, what, where, when, and why. And that's just not realistic.
And so we're at the end of our time, but I think we've brought up a lot of good points. And I thank you for doing the work that your agency does.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you, and I'm sure you're going to get some phone calls from some of the EPCC students that might be interested in
Definitely.
DACA or in becoming U.S. citizens or renewing green cards if they're eligible. So
I
thank
hope
you for
so.
being with us.
Definitely. Thank you.